Hello and welcome to Apropos, a conversation between Clojure programmers that you can join in live on YouTube. We're going to discuss a few Clojure news items and share our opinions, strong or otherwise, on them. Then we'll jump into a REPL and code some exercises or do some demos. If you're joining us live, feel free to comment in the chat and we'll try to address the questions. So I'm going to introduce our panel today. Looks like we got a full Monty. We have Mia.
Hello.
Mike.
Howdy.
Ray.
Hello.
And I'm Eric. And we want to do a shout out today because we have 500 subscribers. Everyone do a gesture. 500. Thank you so much for subscribing. It means a lot to us that people actually care about this show. Does anyone else want to say something about that?
Yeah, I think it's great. I mean, I think we probably thought there would be 5 rather than 500. So
2 orders of magnitude.
Yeah, it's quite impressive. I think it's for us. It's really nice to have people in the chat room and join in as well. And it's great. I'm really happy. I'm really pleased about it. And thanks for all the people for giving us the encouragement.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah, I still don't know how to pronounce the name, but it's really cool. So
The name of our podcast?
It's Apropos.
Is it apropos?
Apropos.
I think the British, consult the British. They know how to speak proper.
They say
No,
pasta. British people say pasta.
French.
It's
I
wrong.
said pasta. Pasta.
Yeah, that's wrong.
What? I don't say
Pasta.
pasta. I said pasta.
It's pasta.
Or
I know.
Yeah.
Pasta. Have you ever
Pasta
heard
la
someone say, there's a joke going around that Canadians say JavaScript?
You've never heard that? That's, yeah.
I don't know why it's funny. Is it because you're about to invade them or something?
No. Just
Okay.
sounds funny to us to say JavaScript. It's
What about
JavaScript.
me then, eh?
Hey. What's that?
What about me then, eh? That's my.
That was an
Canadian
excellent
impression.
Canadian accent.
Sorry about
Sounded
that.
just like a Canadian.
Yeah.
I'm sure JavaScript sounds really silly to a lot of people too.
But that's the funny thing is they probably don't even notice that we say JavaScript. That's Americans down here.
It sounds exactly the same to me.
Java and Java don't
Yeah.
sound different.
Growl versus grawl.
It's really
Yeah.
it's tiny differences,
Are we gonna say
Huge difference.
grawl again for a while?
It's tomato and
growl.
tomato.
No, never say it again.
So before we get into
If we say it 3
actual-
times, it's going to come back.
Like Beetlejuice? Yeah, jeez.
So wait, I need to ask you, Ray. Do you say
yeah.
tomato or tomato?
Ooh, I say tomato. No, I don't. I say tomato. Yeah, tomato. You caught me there. I don't know what I say.
Tomato.
I say tomato, yeah. Tomato.
Very proper.
Yes. The queen would be proud.
Tomato is what I
Wait,
say.
why would you say tomato but not pasta?
I know. They're a mystery.
Come on, let's go on. Let's fight. This is going to be,
wait, do you say-
like language wars.
I remember watching Two Fat Ladies, that TV show, the cooking show, and
Yeah.
they would say jalapeno.
Yeah.
And whenever I would watch it, I would crack up and like roll on the floor a few times.
God. You're easily pleased.
Jalapeno.
Yeah. Yeah, people mispronouncing things. There's YouTube channels for this, Apparently this one now.
All right, on with the Clojure stuff. We can mispronounce stuff like ASOC.
My wife does call it Clojure for what it's worth.
Oh, Clojure. The French.
Yeah, I know. The French, yeah, you have to do your head like that.
All right. So what is our first topic? I'm trying to pull it up and it's not coming up.
I think you mentioned community. noise in the
online?
community or something.
Oh, it was my topic first.
It
Okay.
was you. Noise
All
in
right.
the community.
Okay.
So I've heard many times people in the same breath, they're like, "Isn't Clojure dead?" And Elixir is like exploding.
Mhm.
And so then I like dig a little deeper because I live in the Clojure community. It's not dead. And then it turns out that they just haven't heard much about Clojure recently, and so they assume that no one is using it. And so then, it's like, why don't we talk about it as much as other communities? It's basically the question I have.
One theory I came up with recently is if you talk about it in Slack, you're inside this little closed box. But if you hop out and go on Stack Overflow or anything public, then that perhaps makes a little difference.
Well,
Yeah.
I mean, I feel like when people talk about it, they're comparing Clojure to Elixir, right? Or Erlang or Rust or things that people are doing a lot of in their spare time, but not a lot of people are working with.
That's right. Yeah.
And I think that the hobbyist community for Clojure is probably staying the same or maybe shrinking a little bit, but that doesn't mean people aren't using it more. They're just using it in a business context. And this is a sign of the community turning over from a hobbyist language to an enterprise language.
Maybe Clojure is dead and we just don't realize it.
No, maybe we're all dead. We're living in this nether world.
And why are people watching us?
Maybe that's what they're trying to communicate, that we are dead. They're trying to let us know. So yeah, and it's other things. Like you look at the amount of promotion that an Elixir conference gets versus the Clojure conferences. Like somehow I hear about the Elixir conferences, even though I'm not part of that community really. And I don't know what it is. I somehow feel like Clojure is so mature that we're not talking about new features all the time, whereas they're talking about features that we've had. I don't know. I don't want to make it sound like we're better, but I do remember, because we're not. That's not my point. But it's I don't know. Oh, you got oh no, I'm not gonna say that. I like Elixir, so I'm not gonna. But if they get a library that we already had in the Java ecosystem, we just don't brag about it. I don't know. We're not that excited that someone learned to use that from some Java library from Clojure. Whereas being on a totally different VM, they do get excited because they needed that and it now exists. Not sure.
Yeah, my take on it is that some of these people in the JavaScript world and the Elixir world and the Rust world have just got a better social game than many of the Clojure people. The community outreach people, for whatever reason, are better at getting on other shows or better at pimping out the new features, because there's plenty of new features coming in Clojure.
Yeah,
we're talking all the time about deps.eden, tools, deps, all these kind of things that are happening in the ClojureScript. Every time we get on this YouTube channel, we're talking about some good stuff that's happening, and we're only capturing a small fraction of it. The actual libraries are all popping out all over the place. There's all kinds of stuff going on. But I think somehow, and I think I will take a swing at Cognitect on this one. They're just not very good at pushing out, or there aren't enough people at the sort of leadership level of the community that are good at putting out on the social networks or on the blogosphere or, just that kind of developer advocacy. It just doesn't seem to be working as well in Clojure. I think we're doing a bit here, which is good, but there needs to be more of this. So call to arms, raise your hand, open your mouth, and talk
Start
about
a podcast.
It's bloody good. Start a podcast, start a YouTube channel, write in the blog. I mean, seriously, we haven't got enough of this stuff going on.
Right.
It's embarrassing, I think,
Right.
that I run a podcast and a YouTube channel. Come on, guys, get someone else have a bloody go, you know?
Yeah.
Really, I want people to do other stuff and get, beat us into a cocked hat. So we've got some competition.
Sure.
I mean, I think that the hobby languages are the wrong point of comparison here. But what does concern me is hearing that Euro Clojure might not be happening.
Right.
That's a big concern for me. I think that the amount of chatter may not necessarily be the best gauge for a mature language with enterprise uses, but the conferences should still be there. And if we're losing conferences right and left, then that is a more serious sign to me.
Yeah, but I think I take your point there, but actually, I was talking about this with somebody, and the thing about Europe is that Europe's got lots of conferences, actually. We have like the German conference, we have a Dutch conference, we have a Finnish conference coming up later in the year, there's a London conference. There are like 4 or 5 conferences every year in Europe. More conferences about Clojure in Europe than there are in the US.
That's true.
So I think to some extent it's maybe it's the people looking at Euro Clojure think, well, there's enough conferences there already, the community's going well. So I don't necessarily think that that it's such a big cause for concern, because there are grassroots conferences and and they're really good. I mean, I've been to like 2 or 3 this year even, and they're really excellent.
So there is another difference, and this is going back to what you were saying, Ray, that I know someone who's running an Elixir conference, and he said as soon as they announced it, Jose Valim, who's the creator of Elixir, emailed and was like, "I'll speak if you want me to."
Right.
And it's that kind of just like proactive outreach. And he's like, I'll even, I'll get it paid for. You don't even have to pay me. Just, I just want to be there and talk. That we just don't have. Like, Rich will go to Clojure Conj, but I invited him to Clojure Sync, and he said no. So I mean, not saying he should change, but it does explain, part of that.
And like Dan says, we don't even have Clojure West anymore. Like, Clojure West was fun.
Yeah.
It was really fun.
You should start it again.
But I think Rich does need to get out there, and not just on the Cognicast or on the Clojure podcasts. I remember the conferences that he's done well at are conferences like the Ruby conference, talking about, Simple Made Easy or wherever it was at the Ruby conferences. I'm sure other conferences, Java conferences, Ruby conferences, JavaScript conferences would like to have him there. And, he needs to get out there and do these things. I don't want to tell him his job full stop, but there is an outreach required, and it's by him and by other people at his team, and Alex is doing a great job talking to us, but who's talking out to the world? And I think they need a marketing officer of some type for going to other communities and to broadening the message. And, there needs to be some leadership around this. I'm sorry, but that's their role.
And I also want to say, I agree, so, okay, let me back up. I believe that the reason Clojure is as successful as it is because of Rich's early outreach. He did do a lot of conference talks, and then it kind of slowed down, and he's probably just hard at work on the language and on Datomic right now, and it's just not something that he wants to put time into. And I also sometimes cringe when I hear people saying, well, Cognitex should do this and do that, because I'm kind of like a proactive guy myself, and I just went and created a conference, I didn't think that, oh, they should be making this conference. And so I think that it's kind of like in the Lisp spirit that we don't need to wait for the language to change. We don't need to wait for the company curating it to change. Like most of the Elixir podcasts, I don't know why we keep picking on Elixir, but most of the Elixir podcasts are just community podcasts. They're not like created by the company who does Elixir. And we don't have that either, right? So,
but I mean, I think that, so like, you can't name the company that does Elixir, right? Like maybe you can, I don't know, I can't.
I can't, no. They don't.
I think that, but like everyone knows Cognitect does Clojure, right? And I think that when you have that kind of tight coupling between the people who make the language and the language itself, right? You know, I mean, the relationship with Cognitect and with the community is different than the relationship with other language makers in their communities, because Cognitect has such a strong hold on Clojure. And that means that it is incumbent on them in a way to give their blessing.
Yeah.
In a way that it's not for more community-driven languages. And it's not like good or bad, right? It's not a value judgment. It's just that's how this language works. And Clojure is great. The language is great. But it means that if you're going to have this tight of a hold on it, then you need to give your blessing to help the community grow.
It's really interesting you say that, because I think I don't have that attitude. I remember before there was a Cognitect, there was a kind of loose alliance between Clojure and Relevance. And I still had that, I still feel that. There's like, is one guy making a language, and there's this community around it of interested people. And the more I talk with people nowadays, the more they do express what you're saying, Mia, is that they feel like Cognitect is somehow cramping it. And I never felt that. Like, I always felt like it was just one guy in a language and everybody else who's just...
Well, I'm not saying cramping, right? Like, I mean,
are controlling, and like and people are waiting for permission.
There is a sense of waiting for permission. Yeah, I would agree with that, and that's. I mean, that's. I
need to get over that. I don't. I know Cognitect could do a lot to help people get over it, but I also think that, that it's just not the best.
But most of us don't remember how it was. Like by the time I got to Clojure, it was 2 years ago. And it was already like this. And we're pulling in a lot of new people, right? We're training, we've got 10 new people coming in. We're training them in Clojure, right? And the Clojure that they're entering is this enterprise era Clojure. And there is not enterprise Clojure without Cognitect.
Right.
Yeah, I think also, I don't think it's a permission thing. I think it's a tone thing, personally. I think it's, it would be fine if there was activity from Cognitect marketing the thing. Other people would just not automatically kind of do it as well. I think it's this kind of almost like they're like a clam. They're shut up. They don't say much. They don't do much. Not much is said. And I think there's no leadership in that space, which is a shame. Yeah, that's my view of it anyway. I mean, to be honest, like you, Eric, I don't wait. I think, we start doing things, we start talking about stuff. I'm talking about the overall atmosphere, where I think people feel like there isn't enough in general, there isn't enough promotion and sort of shouting about the great stuff that's going on. There's no problem with being modest as an individual, but the language itself and the facilities and the things that we can do with this language are pretty incredible. And we should be shouting out about them a lot more.
Yeah.
Right. Some nice things coming on the chat here, by the way.
Yeah, well, that is also the other aspect to it. Is like Clojure is this kind of secret sauce for a lot of big businesses, and they don't talk about it.
Right. That's a weird thing, isn't it?
Yeah. you don't really know who's using Clojure until you are in a Clojure job. And then you get some surprising recruiter emails. You're like, what? They're doing that there?
Right.
Yeah.
Like, they don't talk about it. So there's really no way of gauging how widely it's being used.
Right. And like conversely, you see all these Fortune 100 companies saying they use Clojure, and then they have 10,000 employees, but only 10 of them know Clojure, for instance. Where so that you don't even know, if you do know it's at the company, it doesn't mean like a huge number of people is using it. It's hard to gauge the size of the community. Like if you look, so I saw a graph the other day which was tracking languages used in Hacker News Who's Hiring posts. So it's like per month, and Clojure is, believe it or not, still above Elixir and still above Haskell, and way below Scala. And it's sort of like where I would expect it to be, like being inside. So if you're thinking I'm going to learn Elixir because there's a lot more jobs, it just doesn't seem to be true.
But also, like, a lot of times, like, companies put in languages they're not necessarily using to get people who know those languages. And I think that if you're, like, Clojure devs are good devs to hire, right?
Yeah.
There was that really interesting factoid that came out about people who do their coding challenges in different languages, and how likely they are to get a callback. Clojure is one of the highest ones for getting a callback.
Whoa, I didn't know that.
Yeah. It was from a couple of years ago. But that was really interesting to me, right? So people, they're trawling for Clojure devs. They might not necessarily be using Clojure. Or they might be using Clojure, and we don't know.
Yeah.
That they're not, they're
or
not.
They might be open to using Clojure, and they use it.
Yeah.
People are using it on the back end, but they don't have a job that's like listing Clojure. Like it's complex.
By the way, I will, just to redress some of my own imbalance there, I will give a shout out to David Nolan, who does still do quite a lot of reach out to different conferences. He goes around and he just talks. So it's not all silence from Cognitect. I get that. So
yeah, and someone else is mentioning Stu.
If you are watching, David, I do recognize that you're doing a good job. Keep going.
David, we love you.
Yeah.
Someone else is mentioning Stu here. Like, yeah, Josh here says it doesn't need to be rich, and it doesn't. Like, and we do have really great evangelists and great advocates who are out there giving talks and doing things, which is why I don't think that the Clojure is dying conversation. It's always coming up, right? Even you go to our Clojure, and one of the top posts right now on the front page is Clojure is amazingly healthy, which is not a post you would see on a language where people weren't constantly talking about whether it's dying. But like,
his life is good. The health of Clojure is greatly exaggerated.
But like, it's not. I don't really know. Like, we're trying to figure out whose responsibility it is, and I don't know if it's anyone's responsibility. But then there's the question of why aren't there more?
Yeah. And some part of me thinks that like Elixir got a lot of the Ruby magic, that there was just this big I don't know, push for community in the Ruby community. And it's like, if you like a thing, you make a conference and you talk about it a lot, and it's just something that we maybe didn't inherit the way they did.
Because we're all a bunch of hammocks and hammock nappers.
Yeah, we're thinking about our domain, and actually, we're not focused on the language. We're like, I wonder how to best represent this thing in the language. We're not like, oh, did you see if I chain this to that and I can do this and that?
So, and Mike, you've been pretty quiet, and you've done a lot of, like, you are a very visible face of Clojure. I feel like you're certainly a very visible Clojure script face.
Where my mind is I cannot see what you're talking about. I don't see other languages being talked about, perhaps because I stay inside this Clojure world. And I'm wondering, where are you getting this opinion from? Is it from people talking about it on Twitter, or is it just hallway conversations at companies where like, they're talking about some language and you're like, or some developer wants to do their tests in this language or something like that. But it's not Clojure, it's some other language. Is that where it's coming from?
It's from people outside of the Clojure community, and and also outside of Elixir.
I have no friends. That's the problem. I need to like broaden my Twitter followership or something and listen to other people. But yeah, it makes me wonder. So when you see advocacy for other languages, what form does it take? Is it conferences? Is it people just talking about cool stuff on Twitter that they're happy about in their language? Or?
I mean, it's a really good question because I feel like we have really awesome talks at the Clojure conferences. And when I watch talks from other language communities, I'm like, that was okay, but it's not that the speaker wasn't good, it's just the topic was often very basic. It was just something like how to avoid quadratic algorithms, you know. And I mean, that's basic to me. Like in my level, like that's not that interesting. I would rather learn about how to make a rules engine that runs efficiently. You know, that's the kind of thing I'm thinking about. And so I don't know if we just have like this mismatch with what people need, you know, that they would rather have the more basic material. I don't know.
But you get the sense that there is buzz around other communities that you don't see in the Clojure community, or.
And the discourse is so dominated by the Orange website, which is such an unpleasant place to be or look at.
Oh, maybe that's why I can't see this, because I never go to that place.
Yeah. Like maybe Clojure is just don't hang out on the Orange website because it sucks and people are mean.
I don't go there. Yeah. But I think what Eric was referring to was a number of like visible like channels and podcasts and like conferences, community kind of outreach things that people in those other communities do that are a bit more that are fewer in number in the Clojure world, despite us seeming to have a bigger community than they do. So just if it was a pure numbers game, you would imagine there would be 10 podcasts with Clojure, for example.
I guess you could argue that if you look at like blog posts being written about Clojure, you could start to conclude that it's dying, because I'm not writing anymore right now. I don't see other people doing it. Maybe there's something that could be done there. People could just start writing posts about cool things they're finding out.
Adrian in the chat mentions Reason ML. It's like totally new.
Okay, yeah, there is some buzz around that one.
And but that's Facebook, isn't it? That's Facebook. That's a huge company behind it.
There's sure, but you've heard of it, right? And people like I've seen talks locally where people are like, Reason, we're this is what it is, and like I'm like, I don't know, I'm not interested in it, but I still hear about it.
That is true. I have, even though I live under a rock, I've heard about Reason. Yeah. There's something about that language that is getting out there.
Yeah, it's called Facebook having, it's like, why is Go getting out there? It's because you have this giant company getting people to accept it. Yeah. And maybe it's good. I don't know. Like,
so maybe
React isn't really good, but
we should all take jobs at Facebook and start promoting Clojure from within. And,
if you think about Reason is based on OCaml, and OCaml is nowhere. I mean, there was like one financial company, I can't remember the name now, Day or something, and that was it. I mean, nobody. And OCaml was in the wilderness until I think there was a sort of this guy wrote something about the unikernels in OCaml, like a TCP/IP stack, and that the Mirage project, and that took off a little bit. But apart from that, OCaml, nothing.
Well, and like I bet we'll see this with Reason, that there's not going to be jobs in Reason. I mean, Oh,
That's probably true. Yeah.
Like I'm just saying it's like people are going to use it as like a stepping stone to learning types and functional programming.
I mean, do you think that, like, Whittier said that about React when React started?
That what there wouldn't be jobs?
Yeah.
I don't know.
I think if you look at the reason, I mean, Facebook have this editor in theory, at least, where you can type in language X and it emits language Y. That's quite an interesting concept, where you can essentially write JavaScript on the top end and it will come out as or camel or ML in the bottom end, and that will,
it's like the opposite of the natural, pleasant order of things.
Yes, that's true. That's very
write
true.
JavaScript on purpose. Like I'll choose.
Yeah.
When I could be using a nice language.
Yeah, but people go to where the people are, don't they?
Yeah.
And that's where.
Well, also, it could be that people are just like, well, this might be the next React. Like we underestimated React when it came out. Facebook, no one wanted to do anything from Facebook. And now it's like the biggest thing ever.
Yeah, but I think the other point that was made in the chat, I can't remember who made it. Let's have a quick look back in scrolling back here, is that it's kind of got a Ruby-like syntax, Elixir.
Yeah.
And that attracts people. I mean, Java was attractive because it was a bit like C and C++, but different enough to be, and Scala is attractive because it's a bit like Java.
University.
And it's got some extra things. Sorry.
So, and then Sun made deals with every university, so they were taught it in school.
Well, there's that, but I mean, it was popular before that. I mean, the on-ramp to Java from C was relatively easy, and I went through that on-ramp myself. And the on-ramp from C to JavaScript is also relatively easy because the syntax is familiar. The ramp from Java to Scala is very easy. The ramp from Ruby to Elixir is relatively easy. Concepts are all different, but the syntax is familiar. Clojure is different. I mean, we have got the on-ramp is more in your face. It's not just conceptual; it's also syntactical, and that is a challenge. That is a barrier.
Yeah, it is. It really is.
We are 6 minutes
on
late.
On that happy note, yeah.
Okay, well, that means we have some topics for next week that we don't have to prepare for because we already have them. Thank you for that. I don't know if we've resolved anything, but I just wanted to bring that up. I hear that too much. Okay, so we're about to switch over to the REPL. If you're listening on the audio version, the podcast, you can watch the REPL coding on YouTube. Just search for this show. And so we're going to end the audio here. And so if you're still on watching YouTube, let's switch over to the REPL. Are we using this REPL or are we going with the web REPL?
Reptile? Is that the...
We'll just use this one because you want to do your thing, and we'll do a demo of the Reptile next time. I've got some improvements in the pipeline.
Okay, whoever's controlling the REPL screen should click on that one.
Yeah, it's up. And do a join tmux. Is that what we're doing? Ah, there I am. Okay. Okay, so this this episode, I had the idea of developing a tiny Lisp interpreter, and I've pared down the features of our Lisp to something that we could, in theory, finish quickly. And so there's going to be 4 features of this Lisp. We're not going to do any parsing. We're just going to use the Clojure's built-in data structures, so the built-in reader. So we're going to have numbers and strings. Symbols will represent variables. We'll be able to make function calls, and we will have an if conditional. Sound good? So I'm gonna get started. Okay. So, I always like to start an interpreter with just a simple, let's call it my eval. And then it's going to take the environment and the expression. Okay, so that's how it'll start.
Okay, that's cool.
So the environment.
Stuck by there 'cause I can't see it.
Oh,
I see it on the main screen there, but something's lagging really bad. Oh, that's the way it does it though.
wait, I typed and I don't see it on the video.
Is it actually lagging, or is it actually stopped, or is it just lagging?
Okay,
So you don't
keep
really
going. I think it's because the video thing is screwed.
It's usually behind.
No, but
you
what
know,
we're sharing.
It's normally live. Keep going. I'll get it sorted.
Okay, but no one can see what I'm typing.
yeah, yeah, we're definitely moving and twitching in real time in the little faces down the bottom. So
Yeah, and this
So it's
this screen is not keeping up. Should I share my screen? What should we do so we can keep going?
I think he's going to go prod his computer and
Okay.
get it to
Well,
respond.
what I typed was just a. Now it's up. Okay, never mind. I'll type again. See if I do that. Yeah. Okay. So I just
okay,
typed,
but the REPL's not up on the video, so
no there.
No.
Okay, I just typed this defin, just like a basic definition with nothing in it, and I just open up a big cond because that's all an interpreter really is, just a big conditional.
Okay. Yeah.
So we're gonna say we have two things, right? We have numbers. So if it's a number, it's gonna evaluate to itself. If it's a string, it's gonna evaluate to itself. I'm just gonna define this, and by not having enough parens, there we go. Con requires an even number of forms. Expression.
oh, you got to move that.
Okay, there we go. My eval 1. Oops, I need a hash map. And then I can also do string. So now let's go back to this. And inside of this cond. So now we're going to do symbols. All a symbol is going to do is get out of the environment that the value of that variable. So I can do my eval, and I can pass in something like x is 10, and then if I pass in a symbol x, I should get 10. Everyone with me so far?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so now the like when you actually want some syntax to work, you need a list, right? So this we're going to destructure. This is how I do it in Clojure. Is there's an op and then the args.
Okay. Yeah.
And then I do case. That's like the easiest for this because it's going to be literals. So we're going to do our if statement. So if the first thing is an if, what do we do? Well, I'm going to destructure again. So then we have the then expression, the test expression, the then expression, and the else expression are in our args, right? So we're going to eval the test recursively. Does that make sense? So I'm using Clojure's built-in if here. And the test is an expression. It hasn't been evaled yet. So I'm going to eval it recursively with the same environment. And then if it's true or truthy, then we're going to eval the then.
Mm-hmm.
And then in the other case, we eval the else. Okay, so we should be able to do should be able to do a if now. So my eval if, let's just do 1. If we have a 1, because we only have numbers and strings, we probably want a nil. We could add that. That should return. Oh, did something wrong. Oh, it's eval.
You mean to use my eval there?
Yeah, my eval. And the other thing is, this is a tail call position, so you could do a recur if you wanted to be super efficient. These two are.
Ah, okay. Yeah.
Adrian says don't add nil.
Don't add nil.
I'm with you.
Yeah.
We need a false. We need a way to represent false.
It's $1 billion mistake.
That's
Can I have $1 billion?
What's our false? I guess we could add booleans.
Yes.
Let's do that.
So this if, Eric, doesn't it's not like a special form yet, right? So it does it actually evaluate both sides?
It is a special form because it will evaluate conditionally.
Okay, I guess you're passing in a quoted list. All right.
Yeah.
Excellent. All right.
So let's say, is this?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, we do have that. That's a new thing. Now we have literal booleans. We can have. We can do here. So we can do if false, and we get 20. Ooh. I have true. Oops.
Okay. Yeah.
Now let's go again. All right. So we have some literal data, numbers, strings, booleans. We have variables, and we have conditional. But we need function calls. You can add other stuff like a let and stuff, but we probably don't have time for that. So I believe this is the case. Yes. Okay. So the case will have a default, like the last expression in there can be a default. So we're going to assume that this is now the function call part. So we need to eval it though, because it could be a symbol, right? That we don't it's not an if. So it could be a symbol that's a variable. So what I like to do is, again, destructure. We're going to have f and args, but we're going to eval them. Map eval, sorry, got to do it like this. My eval and % over. Okay, and also we don't want to deal with laziness right now, so I'm just going to do a do all.
Okay, so you're evaluating everything in the list right now. All right.
Yep, evaluating the whole thing, all the arguments, and now we're just going to assume, like Clojure does, just assume it's a function now.
Yep.
And we're just going to apply
it. Okay. Very nice.
If you were writing this more from scratch and not relying on a host language like Clojure, you would probably have to write apply yourself. Or if you wrote your own version of a function instead of using Clojure's functions, you'd have to write your own apply. But we're not doing that right now. So now we can do something like this. My eval, and we can pass in the plus function. We're putting it in the environment under the plus symbol. And then we can do plus 1, 2, 3. Let's just do plus 1, 2, because I can't add that high.
Okay.
Should work with this, but then it should work recursively. So we should be able to do like an if statement in there. If true, 10 or 0. And
very nice.
Yeah. So, this is something like, I mean, I've done this so many times, like I could just sit here and like write this out, but it's a good exercise to do to like really understand how Lisps work. And it's like a weekend project. If you're writing the whole thing, with being able to define functions and lets and stuff like that. And it's just a big con.
Right. And isn't this the way McCarthy kind of specified Lisp in the original paper? And then, and it wasn't until they said, oh, if we just implement this little part here with machine language or whatever at the time, then you have the whole thing.
Right. It was like defined in itself, but it couldn't run, obviously, because they didn't have the thing yet. But yeah, then someone just wrote the evaluator, this if statement, this big cond, and then they had it. Pretty cool.
It's so beautiful.
It's Maxwell's equations of computer science.
Yeah. I'm trying to make it all fit on one screen, but I don't think I can.
So are there parts we haven't? I think we've exercised all this stuff, right? You've passed in symbols and an environment and.
Right, and you can do, I mean, if you passed in equals, and you did some math, now you can do more complex conditionals. So, you could, in theory, get like deeply nested statements and then evaluate them.
So this is kind of like you say, kind of an expression in itself. What do you think about mixing these languages, because this is everything has to go through this evaluator. With DSLs, you can have kind of an embedded thing where people can put in Clojure syntax as well. Have you done any of that yet, Eric?
So I guess what you're saying is that you can't embed Clojure into your language here because you're totally bypassing Clojure's evaluator.
Yeah, you're using it. You, Eric, your evaluator is using Clojure, but the user of your my eval can't mix in Clojure because you don't know how to evaluate that.
For sure. So yes, I would only use this for something where you want to restrict what it can do. Places where you would want to have stuff mixed in, like that's where, so we were using lists, right? And so you have to quote the list to get a list. And so what that does is when you quote the whole thing, it's like you're just given the syntax tree. But if you have something like Hiccup that uses the vector, then you're using Clojure's if statements inside of it, or for loops or for comprehensions and stuff inside of it. And so you're still able to use all of Clojure that way because it's all evaluated into a big vector before you get your hands on it.
Yeah, I like those things like Hiccup, and I mean things like Reframe feel a bit like that as well. They feel like it looks a bit like a kind of different language because it's all vectors everywhere, but then you can just write Clojure in the middle of it, and it feels nice. It feels powerful because it's quite declarative in many ways. You're just saying here is a component, here are the arguments, but then you can vary the arguments based on some atom or whatever.
Right. I mean, we probably don't have time, but a Hiccup interpreter is pretty easy to, the thing is you just expect vectors or lists of vectors, right? And so your cond would check, is it a vector? And this is what you do. And if it's a list, this is what you do.
Nice.
Yeah. Interpreters are just big if statements. And it's something like, there's like a palpable feeling when you're like developing a complex conditional when you realize like, oh, I've passed into this zone where it's like very expressive now because I've got all these cases I can be using in the conditional. And it's like, I don't know, it's an intuitive feeling of like, this is now like a language. It's not just a little, it's not just like one if statement like that. At some point you get 5 or 6 of them together and you're like, oh, it's pretty complex now. And then when you go recursive, like in the if or in the function call, that's where you get your power.
Right.
Someone, Pankaj says that a hiccup interpreter in Clojure spec is really easy. And Linux with Attitude said, check out Mal, make a Lisp. It's actually it's a spec for a small Lisp that is done. He says 72 languages. It's a lot of languages. Like the same thing implemented over and over, so you can compare.
Hasn't been done in Reason yet, so.
I think we've running down the clock.
I've been squatting in this meeting room. Someone came and tried to take it, and then they saw the microphone and backed away, their hands up. Eric, did you have something to mention?
Oh, yes, I do have. Thank you for reminding me. I'm running a sale on purelyfunctional.tv, and it's global sale. Everyone's got access to it, except I have a special code for people with Apropos. It gives you a bigger discount. Just to say thank you for listening. I'm going to type the code in here. Wait, let me actually get the code.
And Dan, if you find an intro, so Dan wants to know, does anyone have a really great intro on using Cider for interactive development? And I've just switched over from IntelliJ to Spacemacs, so I'm still working on Cider myself. So I would also be interested in this.
Wow.
The dark side. Yeah.
The dark side, never underestimate the dark side of the Force. Here we go. No, that's not the right one. Sorry. Okay, if you want the big discount, do this one. That'll give you 50% off. It's just Apropos Cast. 50% off any of my courses, but not the membership. Yes. And I have a domain-specific languages course if you're interested in that.
Cool. Very cool.
Thank you for giving me this time to say this.
Okay.
Adrian, I really liked cursive a lot.
Oh no, here we go.
Everyone else was using Cider, and pairing with people was a nightmare. And that's why I switched. It's been nice though. But yeah, if anyone's got any advice for a really good guide, I would also like to hear that. So thanks, Dan, for the question.
I would love a guide too, because I'm sure I'm not using half of the features of Cider.
That's the thing. Yeah.
Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, well, there's just so much.
Yeah. And like most of the keystrokes I know are from like inferior Lisp mode back in the day, and then they got transferred to Slime when we were using that, and then so I don't even know anymore.
Yeah, like
stuff.
There's some. It's like how there's just so many options. And Spacemac shows them all to you at the bottom, and you're like, oh, I bet that one of these things is exactly what I want. It's like looking at jars of peanut butter.
So I mean, if we still have a couple of minutes, I have another question, because I hear people, talk about configuring Emacs or learning Emacs keystrokes and learning Vim keystrokes and configuring it, and how you should spend a little bit each day, like making it just a little bit better. But I'm kind of the opposite. I'm like, give me the minimum I need to learn to do everything I need to do. right? And like I don't want to configure it more than I need to. I want to be able to like do a fresh install and start going. I don't know. What do you guys feel about that?
When I was a VI guy, I always used it raw. I never got into Vim or anything like that, or any of these. I guess I do use a little bit of like Bash and Z shell and stuff like that, but mostly I just use the shell as it is. And I think that's mostly because I kind of understand that I'm going to be using different machines, and they won't always have those facilities or affordances, and so. If you're always going to use one machine, you're going to be stuck in that machine for 5 years, and you can configure it to your heart's content or back it up to GitHub, or you're always going to be in a position where you're always going to have a bit of time to set things up. Then I think it's a great idea. But if you have this feeling that you're always going to, or most of your experience is going to be on a kind of primitive level, then it's good just to get awesome at the most basic commands, I think, and get fluid there.
I mean, I chose Spacemacs because Vim commands are less exhausting than Emacs.
That's for sure. Have you seen that classic Emacs manual picture? Like the cover of the Emacs manual has this alien with like 17 fingers on each hand. And he's like...
I swear.
Right, the super alt meta 7. Okay. I'll hit that.
Hey, everybody, I need to run, so I'm going to drop off.
Yeah.
All right, it's
fun.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.
Oh, Pankaj, I like Spacemacs. I like the color scheme. It's purple, it's teal, it's pink, it's good. All right.
Are you shutting it down, Eric?
I'm shutting it down. Here we go.